Hello, how are you doing? In this video I'm going to tell you a 100% true terrifying ghost story that happened to me and a friend outside the gates of the religious cult that I was born into. But I'm not telling you this story for entertainment, but because I believe it shows the sinister possibility of what is behind religious cults, the forces that drive such people to separate parents from children, wives from husbands, and destroy families. I'm going to expose this possibility at the end, and at the end give my personal views and conclusion, but I will suggest that you make up your own mind as to what went on. Now, if you haven't seen any of these cult escape videos before, I'm running a campaign creating awareness about religious cults to help people trapped in such cults, and I'll put the website in the description below if you want to look at that later. Now, the only reason I'm telling you this gruesome story is because I think it is relevant to the cult campaign and because it has a very good ending. So if ghosts aren't a subject that you want to know about, and I don't blame you if that's the case, maybe skip this video. If not, here's the story. When I wrote this chapter called The Ghosts of Allerton Road for the Cult Escape campaign in this book, Cult Escape, the full story, I spent a lot of time wondering whether I should include it or not, because many people don't believe in these things called ghosts, and it could mean the story could lose a lot of credibility. And I thought ultimately what tipped it for me was that the story is true. It's related to the cult I was in, and for that reason I'm going to include it and publish it. And so I'm going to narrate part of it. I want to major on the point of what happened around the exclusive brethren meeting room at Allerton Road. And so here goes. The first paragraph, I just explain a bit what I want you to hear, which is this. What I'm about to share may appear far-fetched, and for that reason I considered leaving it out. There are some stories people just do not tell for many reasons. Well, I'm not going to fear what people may think who read this one. On balance, it is probably just as crazy, unbelievable, as 50,000 plus sensible people calling a drainpipe worldly. All I will say, though extraordinary, is that this is what literally happened with no exaggeration. I've been through these words, this chapter, with a fine-tooth comb to make sure there's no exaggeration or sensationalism. Exactly what happened is what I write and what I'm going to tell you. I will give you my thoughts about it at the end and leave it for you to think about yourself if you want to, as what you make of it all. If this subject is not one you want to read about, then skip to the next chapter, or don't listen to this video. Right, Phil, I'm using a different name for my friend, was born in Liverpool, a similar age to myself, and for 3 years we worked together. A large group of us worked in sales and promotion, and we socialised together with pool, snooker, many evenings in pubs and bars, talking about football, music, women, putting the world to rights, and finishing off with a Chinese or an Indian meal. I knew Phil very, very well for these 3 years. He was a good friend. So it is the 17th of December 1995. This is the third Sunday evening this month that Phil and I have visited a nightclub called Red's on Edge Lane. That's right. We went about 11 o'clock just for a quiet drink. Being a Sunday, Red's closed at midnight. Afterwards, we went driving around Liverpool for a couple of hours, listening mostly to Queen, our favourite band. On this night, I asked Phil if he would like us to drive to some known haunted locations around Liverpool. We had experienced some horrific times earlier on in the year, with manifestations of some very disturbing things, but evidently I had not learnt the lesson, which was to avoid all of that stuff. So I also want to point out on that this night in question I had only 1 pint of lager, Phil 2 at the very most, we only had an hour, and both of us had never taken drugs in our life. So it had just gone midnight, the roads are quiet, the temperature is close to freezing, and we drive a few miles down to Allerton Road, where the main Liverpool exclusive brethren meeting room, which holds about 600 people, is situated. It's where I went for 22 years when I was there. I stopped outside the entrance, which are metal barred gates that are closed and padlocked. From the car we peer into the darkness through the gates. Suddenly we both become aware of a disturbing presence coming towards us rapidly from behind the gates. With it came an increasing vile odour that we both agree afterwards smelt like death. As it gets closer, the fear causes me to let the clutch out and drive off. Now, for the next hour or so, I took Jeff to various locations around South Liverpool, and there were happenings which I'm not going to narrate here, because I'm going to go straight back to Allerton Road. So I drive up to the same gates of the exclusive Brethren meeting room as before. This is about an hour and a half later. I leave the engine running, foot on the brake, shaken with fear, yet so exhilarated by the past hour or so with what happened then. What happened next was the most frightening thing I've ever experienced. We both experienced a strong presence and a vile smell of death rushing up the drive again from behind the gates. Then suddenly Phil points out of his window and said in a strained voice, "See that?" "See what?" I asked. Phil described about 20 men and women standing there looking at us from behind the gates. The men had long dark coats and were wearing trilby hats. The women wore hats and long dresses and sounded just like the brethren of old in the old photographs that I had seen in family albums growing up. Phil, of course, had never seen such photographs. Phil said they were all looking very sombre and were all staring at us. In the centre was a tall man with a small woman. The goose pimple feeling and fear was so strong, and I remember asking Phil repeatedly, "Can you take this? Shall we go? Are you okay?" Phil was asking the same to me, because our nerves were just absolutely on edge, as you might imagine. Then Phil said that these 20 people, were now on our side of the gate and had started to surround the car. His passenger window was 8 inches down, and suddenly I witnessed Phil's left arm being what looked like being yanked through the window, as if someone was tugging it violently. His body was pulled up against the door, and if the door had been opened, he would have shot out of the car. He was screaming. Imagine that, my friend. He was being yanked hard with his arm out the window. This all happened in the space of a few seconds, and simultaneously I felt my body being lifted up off my seat, literally, so my head banged on the car ceiling. As Phil told me they were surrounding the car, I had subconsciously put the car in first gear with the clutch in and the handbrake off. As I felt my body being lifted up, I stamped on the accelerator and released the clutch, causing the tyres to screech as we sped off down Allerton Road. Within a few seconds, Phil's body slumped down as if he was unconscious or dead even. I was absolutely terrified. If he is dead, it's all my fault, I remember thinking. He didn't know Jesus, he was unprotected, what shall I do? I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going straight to the police station at the end of Allerton Road, opposite Allerton Library. I was going to march up to the desk and tell them that a spirit had tried to pull my friend out of the car through the window. In these minutes of extreme fear and panic, I was not thinking entirely rationally, yet I had the wherewithal to know that the police would breathalyse me and not believe me. But I didn't care if they arrested me. I wanted human company at that point. I had been spending the last hour or so in the weird realm of weird spirits, and if that's what they were, and I wanted some human normality, and sense. Phil was dead, for all I knew. This was not a humorous moment. The reason I say that is because of what happened next. To my horror, the police station had gone part-time and was closed. I parked outside under a streetlight. As I stopped the car, Phil sat up suddenly and looked at me. He was laughing a sort of mocking laugh and staring at me in a focused sort of way. Now, I enjoy having a laugh. I like jokes. I like being silly. But I can tell you this was not the time for humour. This was out of the box terrifying. So I said to him, "What are you laughing at, Phil?" "You are soft. You should not have left where you have just come from," was his strange reply. Phil had never used the word soft and afterwards admitted that it was not a word he had ever used. However, as it happens, I remember my great aunt Irene used to use it. Anyway, she had been a member of the Exclusive Brethren. Then, as if a strong person had hold of him by the lapels, Phil was thrown backwards and forwards from the seat to the windscreen at a speed that was not humanly possible. After about half a minute, he slumped down again as if unconscious. I was going to the next police station. This was not a dream, this was actually happening. I was terrified. On the way, I passed a garage on Smithdown Road. The bright lights and the human cashier I saw drew me there, plus I was thirsty after all this freakiness. I stopped the car. Phil, who appeared unconscious, sat bolt upright again and said these exact words to me. "John, do you want to see something scary?" "No, I don't," I replied instantly. "John, do you want to see something really scary?" "No, I do not." I snapped back. "John, do you want to see something really, really scary?" He asked the third time. He was looking away as soon as he had asked this question. Sorry, I was looking away as soon as he had asked the first question. I didn't want to see anything. "No, shut up, I do not want to," I said, and got out of the car to get 2 drinks for us both. I drove off, heading for the police station a mile away on Waywardshire Road. On the way, we passed Smithdown Road Cemetery. As we passed the gates, Phil started getting thrown violently back and forwards again. With my left hand, I tried to hold him away from the steering wheel as I tried to keep the car on the road with my right hand. We got to the police station, by which time Phil had slumped down again. I ran into the police station. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. I could not see anyone on the desk, but before I got there, I saw a payphone in the foyer. Those days when you used to put 10 pence in the phone. I changed my mind about telling the police and phoned a friend who I thought might be able to help me. I woke this friend up and told him what had happened. He was half asleep, and he said that Phil had become demon possessed and was not good company to be around. That wasn't a lot of help to me, so I got back in the car and Phil was sitting up. "What happened?" I asked him. Speaking quite normally, he told me that an old woman back at Allerton Road had grabbed his arm, tried to pull him out of the car, and had entered him. I still felt responsible for taking Phil to those haunted places, and I didn't want him going home on his own and maybe taking his life. So these are the thoughts that went through my head. So I decided to take him back to my flat in Lisburn Lane, Tuebrook, Liverpool, where he stayed with me for a week. That is the end of the story for now, as far as the incident of the exclusive Brethren's meeting room at Allerton Road is concerned. This is why I mentioned this story, because what happened from the other side of the gates and at the gates outside that room. But I do want to tell you in this story what happened next to Phil and how this story ends up. For a week, Phil manifested what some would describe as demon possession. Deep guttural voices, which weren't his, would come out of him, swearing, accusing and threatening. This was not like Phil. Our friendship was respectful, with never a bad word said between us. Something had happened to him. Maybe it was that old woman who came through the gates in Allerton Road. What else could it be? Cutting the long story short, the following Saturday and Sunday, which was New Year's Eve, 1995, Phil had a 17-hour sleep. Usually he only ever slept 3 to 4 hours because of his metabolism. After he woke at 9 o'clock in the morning that Sunday morning, he called me and told me to call round immediately. Fearing a possible scary manifestation, I first called round to pick up a good friend called Ronnie. What I didn't mention was that in that last week he had gone to stay at a friend's house, house sitting while she was away, and this is where he phoned me up from. So I called my friend Ronnie, as I didn't want to go round on my own and something scary happened. I sure wasn't going to go on my own. We turned up at Phil's front door at 10 o'clock that morning, and he ushered us inside. "You won't believe what has happened," he said. "I fell asleep at 4 o'clock yesterday morning and only woke an hour ago." Phil then described a vision he had whilst asleep. He had never read the Bible in his life, and so as he told us the vision, we were amazed as he described the book of Revelation in great detail that he had seen happening in front of him. Myself and Ronnie knew the Bible very well, and so when he was telling us this vision, we were amazed to hear him accurately describing those chapters. After that vision, he had had a man appear to him dressed in white, saying, "I am the root of David." And for 20 minutes, Phil recounted what the man had told him. And Ronnie and I listened wide-eyed because Phil was quoting texts from the Bible that he had never heard. Phil had never read the Bible. He was an atheist. And yet this man in white called the root of David had told him these things for 20 minutes. At the end, the man in white said to him that this very night, this was the Sunday, the last day of the year, Phil would be baptized in water and in his name, and that he would then baptize him with his Holy Spirit. What happened that night was that Phil was invited to a New Year's Eve celebration in 31 Stoneby Drive, Wallasey, with a group of Christians, and just before midnight he was baptized in a full bath in the name of the Father, Son and Holy Spirit, and as he came up out of the water he started speaking in tongues and was filled with great joy. Phil's life was instantly, completely transformed. The vexation, torment and bad voices stopped instantly, and Phil's life was filled with love, joy and peace. For the next 7 weeks he stayed at mine, sleeping on the sofa. 7 supernatural events took place during this time, of which I don't include in this book. And people who knew Phil before were absolutely amazed at the change. They could not believe how he was so transformed. So, has this story been profitable or significant, I ask? Here are some questions that I have had that maybe only time will reveal what the answers might be. What do those 20 spirits and that vile smell of death that were behind the exclusive brethren meeting rooms gates signify? Why did they surround the car? Why did the old woman who was a spirit try to physically pull Phil out of the car? Why, after the woman entered Phil, did he say to me, "I was soft, I shouldn't have left where I had just come from"? So I include this story in this book, not to make a point, because I can't prove anything from it. I rather suspect, and this is just my opinion, that it was a manifestation of deep-rooted, hardcore, religious, heinous legalism, of which separates families and destroys families. And this same spiritual force, in my view, is what motivates religious cults that control people and ultimately destroy their families. But I will let you come to your own conclusions, and if you may think differently, tell me what you think if you like. If you'd like, put your views in the comments below. One thing I am grateful about, and I'm sure about, is for that man in white who visited Phil, who called himself the Root of David. Who do you think he was?